This is Rwanda, the fourth smallest country on African mainland. Completely landlocked, the nearest seaport is over 1,400 kilometers away by road. It has no oil, no significant mineral wealth, and every single one of its neighbors has been through a civil war, a coup, or an active conflict within the last 30 years. Oh, and in 1994, roughly 800,000 of its own citizens were massacred in 100 days. Its GDP was cut in half, most of its judges murdered, its infrastructure destroyed. The country had, in the most literal sense, been gutted from inside. And yet today, Rwanda is ranked the #1 business environment in Africa. It was the first country on earth to launch a nationwide commercial drone delivery network. Its economy has grown an average of over 7% a year for more than 2 decades. Life expectancy has jumped from 49 years to 69 years. Poverty has been cut nearly in half, and its capital city, Kigali, is now one of the cleanest, most organized cities on the entire continent. This didn't happen by accident. This was engineered deliberately, systematically, using a specific playbook borrowed from a specific country on the other side of the world, Singapore. Between April and July of 1994, approximately 800,000 to 1 million Rwandans, the majority of them ethnic Tutsi, were killed in one of the most concentrated episodes of mass violence in human history. The United Nations and multiple international organizations estimated that roughly 75% of the entire Tutsi population was exterminated. But it wasn't just the human toll. The institutional destruction was total. While digging into this, I stumbled on a number that honestly made me pause. Rwanda has 750 judges, but after the violence, over 500 were gone, killed or forced out. And by 1997, there were only 50 lawyers left, just 50 in the entire country. Over 120,000 genocide suspects were locked up, but the courts were moving so slowly, only about 3,300 cases in 4 years, that at that pace, it would have taken more than 200 years to get through all of them. The economy was basically wiped out. In 1994 alone, GDP collapsed by around 40 to 50%. Income per person dropped to one of its lowest levels ever, about $189. Food production didn't bounce back for years, and around 3/4 of the country's working factories were either destroyed or looted. But here is what really makes this story different from places like Nigeria, Angola, or even Kenya. When Rwanda's leaders sat down after genocide and asked, okay, how do we rebuild? They were starting from almost nothing, especially when it came to geography. Rwanda is landlocked. The nearest seaport, Dar es Salaam, is about 1,400 kilometers away. That's roughly 4 days by truck. And it guess what? Shipping a single 40-foot container from Kigali to either Dar es Salaam or Mombasa costs over $4,000. That's actually more expensive than sending the same container 10,000 kilometers by sea from Shanghai to East Africa. There is no oil, no petroleum, none of that resource cost people always talk about, or depending on how you see it, no resource blessing either. Rwanda does have some minerals, tin, tantalum, tungsten, but mining has only ever made up about 3% of the economy. The reality is, this was a country where roughly 90% of people were surviving on subsistence agriculture. And the country itself is small. You could fit Rwanda inside Nigeria roughly 35 times. And then you look at its neighbor, the DRC, was collapsing into what will become known as Africa's World War. Burundi was in the middle of its own civil war. Even Uganda, Rwanda's closest ally, started to see tensions rise as conflicts spilled across borders. This wasn't a country dealt a good hand, not even close, which is why the story of Paul Kagame matters, whatever you think of him. 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 Whatever you think of him.
point at all. Wouldn't I have a point if I criticize the Western democracy? If democracy is not going to be perfect anywhere at all, as we have seen, don't like is just the hypocrisy. You are so deep in your own mess about democracy, and then you think you have authority to come and make criticisms about others, and even want that to have a consequence on them.
He was born in 1957 in southern Rwanda into a Tutsi family, but by the time he was 2, his family had already been forced to flee during the 1957 Hutu revolution. He grew up in a refugee camp in Uganda. Then in his 20s, he joined the Yoweri Museveni's guerrilla movement in Uganda. He was one of just 27 fighters at the very start, what would eventually turn into successful bush war. And after Museveni took power, Kagame rose through the ranks, eventually becoming acting chief of military intelligence. In 1990, the Rwanda Patriotic Front, the exile movement Kagame helped build, launched an invasion back into Rwanda. At that time, Kagame was actually in Kansas studying at a US military college, but when the RPF's co-founder was killed just 2 days into the invasion, he dropped everything, flew back to Africa, and took command of a force that was demoralized and fewer than 2,000 fighters strong. Over the next few years, he rebuilt it, turning it into a 15,000 strong army by 1993. So when the genocide began in April 1994, it was Kagame's RPF that pushed across the country and ultimately brought the killing to an end. Kigali fell on July 4, 1994. Kagame became the country's de facto leader almost immediately and was formally elected president in April 2000. And here is where the Singapore thread begins. Almost immediately, Kagame started looking outward, studying how other countries had pulled off unlikely transformation. One model stood out: Singapore. Under Lee Kuan Yew, a small resource-poor country that went from a struggling, newly independent state in 1965 to one of the richest places on earth in a single generation. Small country, no natural resources, strong, tightly controlled leadership. In 2008, Kagame even traveled to Singapore and gave a public lecture at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. Around the same time, he brought in Tony Blair's Africa's Governance Initiative, embedding advisory teams directly inside Rwanda's government, from the president's office to finance to the Rwanda Development Board. And when Lee Kuan Yew died in 2015, Kagame didn't hide the influence. He called him an inspiration and described Rwanda as part of that same project, building a nation from almost nothing. This wasn't accidental. The parallels were deliberate. The ambition was clear. Kagame even had a name for it. He wanted Rwanda to become the Singapore of Africa. The question was, could he actually pull it off? In the year 2000, Rwanda, starting from almost nothing, GDP per person was just around $220. And that's when they launched something called Vision 2020, their first real long-term plan for rebuilding the country. But what's interesting is what they chose to focus on: good governance, education and skill, a private sector economy, infrastructure, agriculture, and regional trade. And if you look closely, you will notice what's missing: no mining, no oil, no natural resources, because Rwanda didn't have those. So instead, they focused on what they could build: institutions, systems, and trust. And the result over 20 years, honestly pretty remarkable. The economy grew at an average of 7.2% a year, right in line with the target. Life expectancy jumped from 49 to 69. That's a 20-year increase. And Rwanda's ease of doing business ranking climbed from around 150th in the world to 29th. But it wasn't perfect. The goal for income per person was $1,240. The reality, closer to $820. Poverty was supposed to drop below 30%. It landed at around 38%. and Rwanda didn't quite make it up to middle income status. Kagame's own way of putting it was telling. He said Vision 2020 was about what we had to do to survive and regain our dignity. And then he moved on to the next phase. In December 2020, Rwanda launched Vision 2050, and the targets are breathtaking. Upper middle income country by 2035 with GDP per capita hitting $4,036, high income country by 2050 and $12,476. That requires a growth rate of around 12% per year through 2035. To put that in perspective, Rwanda's GDP per person today is just about $1,000. And what they are aiming for is a 12 times increase in just 24 years. So, is that actually realistic? Well, it depends. One analysis found that in a really optimistic scenario, Rwanda could hit around $16,000 by 2050, just above the target. But if things keep moving the way they are right now, it's closer to $6,700. So yeah, it's possible, but it will mean Rwanda has to move a lot faster than it already is. But here is where Rwanda's approach really starts to stand out. This wasn't just about copying Western development models. Alongside that Singapore policy playbook, they built something else, what they call homegrown solutions. Basically, governance tools rooted in their own pre-colonial traditions. And honestly, this might be one of the most overlooked parts of the whole story. Take Umuganda Community Walk. On the last Saturday of every month, from 8 a.m. to 11, the country just pauses. If you are between 18 and 65, you are expected to show up and contribute, cleaning the street, building schools, planting trees, and the people actually do it. Participation rates are somewhere between 80 to 90%. It's not really optional either. There are fines if you skip. Since 2007, Umuganda alone has generated over $127 million worth of value, thousands of classrooms built, thousands of homes for vulnerable families. It's development, but organized at the level of the entire society. And then there is Imihigo performance contract. Every year, mayors, ministers, heads of agency, they all sign binding contract with the president. Clear targets, clear deadlines, hit your goals, you stay. Miss them, you're out. And that right there is the engine behind Rwanda's results-driven style of governance. And then there is Gacaca Community Justice Courts. Rwanda was dealing with around 120,000 genocide suspects and a judicial system that had basically collapsed. So they did something extraordinary. They created over 12,000 community courts between 2002 and 2012. Those courts handled nearly 2 million cases. The judges weren't career lawyers, they were elected members of the community. Now, it wasn't perfect. Rwanda Rights Watch raised serious concerns about fairness and due process, but at the same time, it was a uniquely Rwanda response to what was honestly an almost impossible situation. Okay, now let's talk about rankings, because this is where you see the Singapore playbook in action. In 2005, it took 355 days to register company in Rwanda. By 2019, it took 6 hours. 6! The process is completely digital, completely free, done through Rwanda Development Board's online portal. In 2009, Rwanda was named the World Bank Top Reformer globally, the first African country to earn that title. By 2019, Rwanda peaked at 29th in the world, the only low-income country in top 30, ranking above Japan and Switzerland. And when the World Bank replaced doing business ranking with the new Business Ready report in 2025, Rwanda didn't just perform well, it stood out. It ranked number 1 in Africa and 12th globally for operational efficiency. In fact, it was the only sub-Saharan African country to make it into the top tier. And then there is digital government side, which is kind of wild. Rwanda built this platform called Irembo. It was basically a one-stop portal where you can access over 200 government services across nearly 40 different institutions. And it's not just sitting there, More than 5 million applications go through it every year. The impact is huge. It saves citizens over 120 million working hours. Something that used to take about 5 days can now be done in roughly 24 hours. And nearly half of the users are already paying digitally. What's even more interesting is how they have made it work beyond the cities. Over 3,000 digital ambassadors are spread across rural areas, helping people actually use the system. It doesn't stop there. Rwanda has digitized every single land title in the country, about 8.8 million parcels, all mapped and registered electronically. Even the courts are digital now, with an electronic case management system that won a major Commonwealth Innovation Award in 2024. It's not just digital for the sake of it, it's digital that actually changes how the state functions. Africa has no shortage of Vision 2030s and Agenda 2063s. What makes Rwanda different isn't the plan, it's the execution. It's the fact that when they say they had cut company registration for 354 days to 6 hours, they actually did it. Okay, let's take you to Kigali, because this is where the transformation gets visual. Kigali sits at about 1,542 meters elevation, nearly a mile above sea level. The climate is 12 to 27 degrees Celsius year-round. It's often described as one of the cleanest cities in Africa, and honestly, multiple sources from UNDP to travel journalists to surprise first-time visitors confirmed it. And even the city itself reflects that same thinking. Kigali's long-term blueprint, the Kigali Master Plan 2050, was designed by Sobana Jurong, a planning firm based in Singapore. And yeah, that connection is very intentional. They are not new to this either. They were behind the original 2013 Master Plan as well. And their work on Kigali has been recognized multiple times, winning awards from the Singapore Institute of Planners. So even at the level of how the city is designed, you can see that Singapore influence is running all the way through. The Kigali Convention Center opened in 2016, a $300 million facility with a 2,600-seat auditorium under a 40-meter translucent dome inspired by a traditional Rwanda King's Palace. It hosted the African Union Summit, the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, the FIFA Congress, the first time on African soil. Take BK Arena, East Africa's largest indoor arena with 10,000 seats. It was built by a Turkish firm in just 6 months for about $104 million. Since then, it's hosted everything from the first ever Basketball Africa League in 2021 to the FIFA Congress in 2023. And now, the skyline itself is starting to rise. There is Kigali Green Complex, a 29-story tower that is said to become the tallest building in the country. And then there is Kigali Innovation City, a $300 million first phase of what's planned to become a $2 billion tech hub. Ground was broken in late 2024 and is already anchored by institutions like Carnegie Mellon University's African campus. Step back and you can see what Rwanda is doing here. This isn't just rebuilding a country, it's trying to redesign one. And then there is a plastic bag ban. Rwanda banned single-use plastic bags in 2008, years before most Western countries even started talking about it. In 2019, Rwanda went further and became one of the first countries in Africa to ban a single-use plastics. The combination of Uganda's monthly communities cleanup and strict environmental enforcement has created a city brand that visitors consistently describe as remarkably clean. Okay, this is where things get really interesting, because Rwanda didn't just build infrastructure, they built a brand. And the way they did it was honestly kind of audacious. In May 2018, this tiny African country with a GDP per person of around $800 went out and signed a sponsorship deal with Arsenal Football Club, one of the biggest sports brands in the world. Visit Rwanda ended up on Arsenal's sleeve, the club's first ever sleeve sponsor, and the deal reportedly around £10 million a year. And it didn't stop there. They expanded to PSG, both the men's and women's team. Then Bayern Munich with branding running across the LED boards inside 75,000-seat Allianz Arena. Atletico Madrid too, where Rwanda became the club's first ever African commercial partner. And then in October 2025, they went even bigger, crossing the Atlantic. Rwanda signed on as the exclusive jersey patch sponsor for LA Clippers and the official international tourism sponsor. At that point, this wasn't just marketing anymore, this was strategy. Now the backlash was immediate and severe. Dutch members of the parliament were furious.
Politicians in the Netherlands want an investigation into Rwanda's recently announced sponsorship deal with the English Premier League side Arsenal. Some lawmakers over there, others too in Germany and the United Kingdom, are concerned apparently by this multi-million-dollar deal at a time when all three countries contribute a significant amount of aid to Rwanda. Visit Rwanda announced a 3-year agreement with Arsenal, which will see its logo emblazoned on the sleeve of the side shirts. But Rwanda's government insists the funding for this deal came from existing tourism revenues, and it hopes it will provide a major boost to the country's tourist industry.
Claire Akamanzi, then CEO of Rwanda Development Board, said, "Anyone who criticizes our deal on account of Rwanda being poor either wishes for Rwanda to remain perpetually so or doesn't understand that marketing costs a key component of any business." Rwanda's state minister put it even more bluntly. "Dear MPs from the Netherlands, this is none of your business. And keep in mind, aid as percentage of Rwanda budget had dropped from around 80% in the early 2000s to about 17% at the time of the deal. And the numbers by the end of 2024, tourism revenues had reached $647 million, up from roughly $200 million in 2010. Visitors' arrivals hit 1.36 million before the Arsenal partnership. 71% of the club's global fan base didn't think of Rwanda as a travel destination. By the end of year one, half said they will consider visiting. And there is the crown jewel, gorilla tourism. Rwanda charges $1,500 per person for a gorilla trekking permit. Only 96 permits are issued per day. It's a deliberate high-value, low-volume strategy. Gorilla tourism alone generated $200 million in 2024.
This is amazing. One of the best experiences I've ever had in my life.
The mountain gorilla population has grown from low of roughly 250 in the late 1970s to over 1,000 today. One of the very few great ape species whose population is actually increasing. And by law, 10% of all national park revenue goes back into surrounding communities. And then there is a tech play. In 2016, Rwanda became the first country in the world to launch commercial drone delivery, partnering with California-based Zipline. The first life saved was on December 21st, 2016. A 2-year-old girl named Ghislaine who needed an emergency blood transfusion at a rural hospital. Zipline now delivers 75% of Rwanda's blood supply outside Kigali, over 150 flights per day from the Muhanga Distribution Center alone. A 2002 Lancet study found delivery time shortened by 61%, blood waste reduced by 67%. In February 2026, Rwanda expanded partnership again, becoming the first country in the world to launch nationwide autonomous logistics coverage, the first in Africa to deploy Zipline's urban delivery systems, and the host of Africa's first autonomous delivery testing center. the most visa open country in Africa, tied with Gambia with a perfect score on the 2025 Africa Visa Openness Index. Any African citizen can enter without a prior visa. Now let's zoom out for a second, because when you stack all of this, the business rankings, the drone network, the guerrilla tourism, the sports sponsorship, the convention center, the clean street, the visa openness, you start to see something that isn't just a development strategy, it is a brand. A deliberately constructed, meticulously maintained national brand. And it worked. Rwanda went from a negative one-word association to a multi-dimensional identity. Innovation, cleanliness, ambition, gorillas, football, conferences. That is arguably the most successful national rebranding in modern African history. Here's what's coming. The Bugesera International Airport, a $2 billion joint venture with Qatar Airways, is targeting a mid-2028 opening with a capacity for 7 to 8 million passengers per year. Kigali Innovation Center, when complete, is projected to create over 50,000 jobs. The economic momentum is still accelerating. Rwanda grew 8.9% in 2024 and 9.4% in 2025, outperforming even the government's own projection. Services now account for over half of GDP, but the succession question looms. Kagame is 68 years old. 65% of Rwanda's population is under 30. They have never known another president. There is no credible succession mechanism. If you love definitive infrastructure projects like this, please like and subscribe, and let me know in the comment section what other African countries can learn from this Rwanda story. If you want to see another African country that is making a massive bet on single mega project to transform its economy, watch this video about the Dangote refinery. I will see you there.